Hi guys, hey, it's Gavin here, and I'm actually at home right now, and I've got Ammon Bundy on the line. You know, we've had a lot of things going on this year. There's been a lot of debates and discord and division and disunity, but especially in the last couple of weeks, you know, there's been a lot going on, a lot of name calling. Sometimes things get a little out of hand, but I wanted us to sit down with Ammon, and I've actually got a few questions that I'm going to ask Ammon in particular. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. I've got Ammon on the line. And I just thought, well, maybe Ammon could talk to us a little bit and we could get some focus again, kind of get back to, you know, what was the Bundy Ranch all about? What was Oregon all about? What's Liberty all about? And so, Ammon, are you there?
Yes, Gavin. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to hear from you. And I know people out here will be very, very happy to hear from you. It's been an interesting year, an interesting couple weeks, and we're just sitting here wishing things would hurry up, waiting for those not guilty verdicts so you guys can all get out of there.
Well, you're not alone, I'll tell you that.
I know. Well, let's talk about a couple issues, and we might chat a little bit about them, but I particularly want to know how you feel on some of these things. And we get a lot of disputes and a lot of faction, I think, going on. And oftentimes it's hard to get rid of that unless we're immediately in the thick of something. You know, I remember at Bundy Ranch, the faction to a degree went away because we were in the middle of something that was intense. And so people came together and they set aside their differences a bit better. But I just got 4 or 5 questions here, and then we can talk about whatever. But I thought you'd be able to address these. And the first one, and this comes up a lot, and it's controversial, but I think we need to consider it, all of us as liberty lovers, is we have government and we have laws, you know, protecting police, and we have blue lines, and we have factions created from this. But let's get down to the basics of it. In your mind, what makes a good cop? What is a good cop? What do they do, and how can we identify them?
Well, I think, and that is an interesting question, but I think you have to look at, in order to find out or, you know, come to the conclusion of what a good cop is, you have to look at what his job is.
Right.
And his job, sole purpose, in which the people hired him for, him or her, is to protect the individual's life, to protect their liberty, and to protect their property. And that is it. And it certainly is not the officer's job to protect the bureaucrats' power. It's certainly not their job to protect the bureaucrats' laws. And it is simply and very clear as we look at how law enforcement, if you want to call it that, we could talk about that in a little bit, but
right.
How they came about, and that was to protect the individual's life, liberty, and property. So a officer that might be out and about doing other things is not necessarily doing his job. And it's not even that simple. I guess let me back up just a little bit. This whole law enforcement idea, even calling them law enforcement, is something that has only been crafted in the last 30 years or so. We didn't call them law enforcement 30, even 20,
in an inmate facility.
30, even plus 20 plus years ago. They were called, you know, police officers, peace officers, but originally they were called officers. And their job was literally to protect life, liberty, and property, and that was the only reason why they were there. And now what we have is we have the bureaucrats, the head of these agencies that have created all these laws and for their own benefit, for their own power. And now they say that these individuals, these officers, are law enforcement.
Right.
Which is not true. That was never their purpose. Their purpose was never to enforce laws. Their purpose was to protect life, liberty, and property. And I hope that makes sense, because there is a huge difference.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
And So that kind of gets us started, Gavin. I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
fully or
I
not,
think that's really
gets
good.
us going down that road.
Yeah, because really it sounds like it comes down to our rights, which aren't given
Does
by.
that make sense,
Yeah, it does. Can you hear me?
Gavin?
Can you hear me? Are you there? Hang on.
Gavin?
Ammon, you there? You there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I hear you now. I couldn't there for a little bit.
Okay, something's wigging out. Let me switch it over here. Can you hear me now? Hang on. Let me figure out what's going on here. Somebody's messing with me.
Muted. Unmuted.
Ammon, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I don't know what happened there. All right. Yes, that does answer my question. I think that was good. And I think really it comes down to we have rights. They're not given by, but they're affirmed by the Constitution. And this is why I get so frustrated with officers. You know, it's like the guy I talked out to in front of the courthouse the other day, the federal officer. I get really frustrated because they're always passing the buck and they're saying, well, that's not my job. I say, well, aren't you going to defend us? Aren't you going to protect our rights? And they say, well, I'm not in that building. I'm over here. And it seems like we always have an excuse. But to me, what makes a good cop in a way is not one that doesn't kick us in the head on the side of the road. A good cop is the one that stops the ones who do that. It sounds like you would be on the same page with that.
Yeah, and it's difficult because
from an inmate facility.
it's difficult. It's difficult for us, and it's difficult for them too, because there's a tremendous amount of pressure that's put on them to basically be law enforcement, not
Right.
protectors of life, liberty, and property.
Right.
And they're actually threatened with their livelihood. They're threatened that
Exactly.
if they don't do what they're supposed to do according to the bureaucracies, that they will lose their job. And, you know, you've heard it, I've heard it, many people have heard it, that I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
And actually the other day in here, I heard a guy say, well, I'm just paying my mortgage. That's what he said.
Wow.
You know,
Okay.
right before he did a strip search on me, he said, you know, and I'm questioning him about my rights, about the Bill of Rights, about,
Right.
you know, my 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment, my rights that are protected by the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. And I'm saying, look, you know, I'm not a convicted man. I should not have to strip in front of you.
Exactly.
And be strip searched by
That's
you.
gross.
But he says, you know, no, I have to do it. I'm paying my mortgage.
So yeah, moral.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes, you know, difficult because that individual is making a personal decision. And each person makes those decisions themselves, and they have to determine what they're going to do and what they're not going to do.
Right. Right.
And,
Okay.
and what we need, Gavin, is we need officers that say no.
Yeah, we
And
need
that are
officers that
willing
say no.
Yeah, we need officers that are willing to say no. They're willing to understand the principles of freedom. And yes, some might lose their job, but you know what? It's better than us losing our freedom. And their
Right.
whole job is to protect our freedom.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. I think you're spot on. This kind of leads into the next question, and I love that even though they have you in chains and they're trying to keep you down, you're still raising these questions, and it kind of goes to my next question. If we've kind of established fundamentally the foundation of a good cop, but the next question is people that speak up are always getting attacked if they're not saying the norm. And I guess my question to you is it right to question officers? And if need be, is it right to disobey an officer's unlawful orders when we come to that point?
That's very interesting because I want to go back to the Bundy Ranch.
Right.
Okay. There were several incidences building up where the Bureau of Land Management, you know, agents that wanted to claim that they had law enforcement authority,
Right.
came in and abused us, literally beat us to the ground, tased us, threw us on the ground, sick dogs on us, pointed their guns at us, you know, arrested us. I mean, they did all these things, okay? And we protested them very heavily and basically saying, you don't have authority here, you don't have a right to be here, you know, you're destroying our liberties. You're taking our property, and you don't have a right to do that. And I look back on those videos because we're constantly involved in that because we're in this defending what we did.
Right.
And I feel so justified in our actions, in standing up to them.
Absolutely.
And standing up to their abuse, and standing up to them taking our trying to take our ranch after 140 years, and standing up to them beating us and all of that.
Right.
And then we look at how it progressed. It goes all the way till April 12th, and we get underneath that bridge, and we're telling the BLM to go home, and they're pointing guns at us and saying that we that basically they're going to use force on us, and that's the scenario. And then here comes down the wash
from an inmate facility.
2 officers, and they're dressed in different clothing. They come right through all those BLM guns, right past all those federal agents, and walk right up to the fence. And we immediately recognize them as our county sheriffs, at least county sheriff deputies.
Right.
Deputy Tom Roberts and another deputy. And it was amazing. It was so powerful because you could feel that man had authority. And we recognized that. And he said, Ammon, my name is Deputy Tom Roberts, and I'm here to help. What do you want me to do?
Right.
And I said, hey, you have authority here. You tell us what to do, and we'll listen to you. And I stood up on the fence, and I pointed to Dan Love, who was the head of the BLM, and I said, this man here, I said it to the crowd, does not have authority here. And I pointed to Tom Roberts, the county sheriff, and I said, this man has authority here, and we will do as he asks. And he asked us to back away a little bit, get about 20 feet or so away from the fence, and then he turns around and he demands that the BLM put down their weapons and back away. And guess what happened?
They did.
They did it.
Right.
They did it.
So then, Ammon, can I interject here just a little bit so you can address this? It seems like, and I think maybe this will go back to John Locke and our founding fathers, authority ultimately comes from God or our natural rights, if people prefer. It comes from life, liberty, and property and protecting it. So this sheriff, had the sheriff been violating you, he wouldn't have had authority. In fact, the whole Bundy Ranch incident, had the sheriff stepped up sooner, would have come out very differently. But the sheriff had authority not only because he was an elected official, elected by the people, but his authority was made valid by the fact that he was defending life, liberty, and property. Am I understanding right in terms of where you're going with that?
That is exactly. It is twofold, Gavin. It is, one, does he have authority given to him from the people?
Right.
And we need to talk a little bit more about that. But 2, is he using that authority properly? Which the only proper way to use that authority is to protect life, liberty, and property.
Right.
When you're protecting a bureaucracy, when you're protecting, someone else's power, someone else's, ideas or social theologies, then you're no longer using that authority correctly.
Right.
And so it's twofold. And that's exactly right. That sheriff deputy came down there to protect life, liberty, and property. And we immediately recognized it. And second, or maybe even first, I don't know, he had the authority from the people.
Right.
And let's address that a little bit.
This call is from an inmate facility.
How did that sheriff deputy get authority from the people? He was deputized by the county sheriff.
Right.
And the county sheriff received that authority through an election. The people voted to give that person, the county sheriff, to give him the policing and arresting power that the people held.
Right.
And there is no other way. You can't have a federal agency that goes to a law enforcement school and then gets a certificate from some, teacher or from school, and then all of a sudden now they have the authority to arrest you, to break down your door and come into your home, to police you, to take your property, to do all those things. Just because they went to law enforcement school does not mean that they have authority. That authority comes from the people, and it's given to a certain person, either a man or a woman, through an election.
It's a delegation.
That is why the sheriff has to be and is the supreme law enforcement officer in the county. And no one can come in and enforce law inside his county without his permission, without him deputizing them and authorizing it. And that is the way that the people are safe.
So that essentially, and this is something I think people forget, and is that, and it's probably going to cut us off, so we might want to have you call back one more time, because we got a lot of listeners, and these are good words. And by the way, Lisa is in the stream too, and she said she loves you, and lots of people in there shouting out to you. But I think it's important then for the people to know
1 minute remaining,
and that you can only give authority that you have. So, for example, the people often say, well, people will tell me when a lawless law is passed that violates our rights, they'll say the people have spoken, right? They'll say the people have spoken, they created the BLM. Well, the people don't have a right to act outside the authority that they already have, just like the Congress doesn't have a right, just like the sheriff or the law enforcement officer. They can only act within authority given to them by the people that the people had a right to give them in the first place.
That's correct. And there's nowhere where Congress gives the BLM, or even the people give Congress, the authority for the BLM to enforce law. There is none. It is not there.
No, Congress has no authority to make new agencies that make new laws. They're supposed to be the lawmakers. Ammon, I know they're going to cut us off in a second,
your time is up.
so call me back.
Call ended.
Okay, guys, hopefully we'll hear back from him in just a moment and get the word out on this. It sounds to me like everybody's hearing okay. I see you guys in there. And what powerful words. Here's the thing, guys. We need to get focused again. Ammon is talking about boldness. Look what they did in Oregon. Look what they did in Nevada. Look at what happened when we stood together instead of saying, let's obey fake officers. Let's obey lawless authority. We need to come together. Unity means finding a like-minded principle, right? It means coming together. It doesn't mean we agree on everything, but it means coming together with one mind to stand up for what we believe. And what is that? It's liberty. It's our Constitution. It's for everybody. And I got a couple more questions I'm going to pose to Ammon as we wrap this up and just try and cover this. Honestly, we could probably talk for hours, but if we go too long, it's probably going to be too much. Hang on a minute. Let me make sure that, oh man, let's see. I think my phone messed it up a little bit. So hopefully he'll call right back. Because we certainly, there he is. Okay, hold on.
Hello, this is an Amtel operator with a prepaid call from
Ammon Bundy.
To accept this prepaid, all phone calls are subject to monitoring and recording.
Maybe they'll actually listen to this one.
$23.30. Thank you for using Amtel.
You there, Ammon?
Hey, Gavin. Yep.
Okay, well, hey, people are loving the information you're giving. Let's go on and, we've talked about lawful authority. We've talked about the sheriff's, what makes a good cop, what makes a cop in the first place, and I think you addressed that really well. And we could go in deeper on it, I'm sure, but let's go on a little bit. And I think this one is fairly simple, but I wanted to present it to you. Is it ever okay, I don't care who you are, right? Because a civilian has a right to defend his rights. He has a right to defend his family, just like an officer has a duty to do the same for us. But it's my belief that our rights end where another's begin. And so is it ever okay to silence someone's right to speech? Because we see that a lot out here from all kinds of factions, right? That faction needs to be quiet. We need our free speech. And so we see a lot of discord. But I guess the question really is it ever okay to silence someone else's right to speech?
Gavin, I would love to answer that question, but I need to draw one more conclusion on the last topic before I...
Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
And that is, we talk about the sheriff's authority and how he has the ultimate authority, policing and arresting authority, because it comes from the people, directly from the people. And I want to ask a question, or at least have people think about this. If the federal government, and I'm just going to hypothetically, right? I'm
Right.
gonna laugh when I say it. If the federal government become predatory upon the people's rights,
Right.
right? And they come down among the people in the states and in the counties and start taking their rights away, their lives, their liberties, their properties away.
Mm-hmm.
Who is supposed to stop them?
The sheriff.
You're right. The sheriff, we've hired him to do that.
Right.
And our country, our foundational principles of this nation were built upon that.
Right.
Our founders knew that the potential for the federal government, or any government in that matter, that fact is that they would be predatory upon the people's rights.
Absolutely.
And so there was checks and balance put in place. And my question is this: if the sheriff's job is not to do that, then who's going to do it?
Right. Well, at that point,
It's not a question of whether the federal government is going to be predatory or not.
right.
It's a question is who's going to stop them.
Well, and if the sheriff refuses to stop them, I would say that historically and morally, it falls back to the people.
That's exactly right, because it's the people's rights anyway.
Exactly.
That's what happened at the Bundy Ranch. The sheriff
Yes.
would not step up. We were not going to allow our rights to be taken. So we stepped up and began to protest them. And then finally the sheriff, protest the sheriff too for not doing his job.
Sure.
Finally the sheriff came in and ultimately did his job. But my point is if we think that the federal government we're some subsidiary of the federal government and we cannot stop them from doing what they want to do because they're the federal government,
Right.
we are in a complete incorrect mindset. It is our
really
duty
are.
to stop them. And for example, let's just go one step further. Although I completely disagree with the UN, we'll talk about that another day.
Right.
But what if the UN came into the states and began taking the people's life, liberty, and property, oppressing the people? Then whose duty would it be to stop them?
The sheriff and the people, it's
would be
their
the
right as well.
sheriff.
Yeah. But and when the sheriff,
It would be the state.
right.
It'd be the federal government's duty to stop them, right?
Well, and it'd also be at that
what
point
if-
the
but what
militia,
if-
who are the people themselves. But the people don't.
Or the people themselves.
Yeah.
That's right. Through the uniting of the militia or whatever means is
From
necessary.
an inmate
But the
facility.
point being is that is what our protection is.
Right.
And our sheriffs across this country have forgot what their duty is.
I know.
And they either forgot or they've never learned.
Right.
Their responsibility, first and foremost, is to protect the individuals in their counties' life, liberty, and property
Right.
against
Awesome.
the state, against the federal government, or against the UN, or anybody else, or against another individual.
Right. Right. It's
That is
it's
their
so
duty,
simple
their
when we get down to it. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Do you want?
One more point?
Yes.
And I know we got to move on, but one last thing. And why is it so important that the sheriff is the one that polices and arrests in your county? And my answer is because if the people are not happy with the way he's doing it,
Exactly.
then they can elect him out.
Right.
They can even recall him.
Right.
They got full control of that sheriff, and he answers to them. And the state doesn't answer to them directly. The federal government doesn't answer to them directly. But the county sheriff answers to them directly.
Exactly.
And if they're being abused, they can get them out of there quick, resolve the problem, and therefore be protected under their life, their liberties, and their property.
That's awesome. You're exactly right. And the message is gaining ground because there's people in the stream here, Ammon, answering the questions as you pose them and getting them right. So really, it's not in vain. Okay.
No, it's very simple. It's very simple, and these are principles. These are principles of
From an
freedom.
inmate facility.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not making them up. These are our
These aren't
founders
new.
understood them very
Right.
clearly.
These go back even before the Constitution. So, okay, cool.
Absolutely.
The next question, and I'll read it again since it's been a few minutes, but I don't really think you'll have to expound on it too much. I just thought it was relevant because we have so many factions and political parties calling each other names out here. Is it okay to silence someone's right to speech?
So my answer to that is very simple. We have an obligation when we disagree with each other we have an obligation to try to get the other person to understand our view.
Right.
And through words. And immediately when it goes to force, when someone uses physical force on somebody, then it's wrong. We do not have a right to do that. If you disagree with me, Gavin, or I disagree with you,
right,
it's my challenge, I guess, to try to convince you that I'm right, and for you to make the choice
exactly
whether I'm right or not.
So
whenever I say, Gavin, you won't listen to me, now I'm going to use force on you, then that's where I've crossed the line.
So the use of force, then, Ammon, is always under life, liberty, and property, because that's what ours is. So if our life, liberty, and property is violated and we have no recourse, that's the only time when the use of force is righteous is in defense of somebody using force or violence to violate your rights.
That's right. When someone tries to force you to do something or to believe something that you don't want to,
right,
and they use force, then and only then do you have a right to defend yourself.
I agree. Okay, I think that's...
And same with, well, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, well, feel free to make a comment if you want. I mean, obviously, I think this applies to all rights.
When a police officer's life or liberty is in danger, they have a right to defend themselves.
Sure.
And that is the only time that they have a right. They do not have a right to take a life unless their life is in danger.
Well, and it raises a hard question that we can't get too deep into today because we'd have to examine the incidents. But we see oftentimes where police officers, by enforcing their false statutes or their false arrests, are violating people's rights. And so I guess Lavoie would have been a perfect example, right? Lavoie chose to lay down his life for his friends, but he had a right to resist if he had chosen that, because those officers, it didn't matter that they had a badge on, they were just people. And if someone is violating your right, you have a right to respond. And I think Lavoie did well, and he made a spiritually inspired, wise choice. But he had a right at that point to defend himself.
Well, and he didn't even exert that right.
No, he didn't.
Stayed well beyond the side, and
exactly. And they still killed him. They still killed him.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. But officers of the law have no more rights than an individual, and
right.
They also have no less rights, other than it is their duty to protect. They were hired, and actually took an oath to protect life. So the minute that they're taking life, they've failed.
Yeah.
And the minute they've taken liberty, which is even the minute they handcuff somebody, then in a sense, their whole job is to, if it's not in defense, if it's not protecting somebody else's life, liberty, property, and they've just failed.
They've stepped outside. They're no longer an authority because they've said, hey, let's say I'm going to arrest you for some fake charge because you didn't pay us some fee that we made up for you. When there's no crime and there's no violation, now they become the violator and they've stepped outside their authority. And we see this so often, and it's really hard to get back to the focus of simple defenders of liberty.
Yeah, but it is very simple, though. And
it
is that the people have hired them and have given them the charge to protect their life, their liberties, and their property.
Right.
And whenever the people's life, liberty, or property is taken, in a sense, the officers have failed.
Exactly.
And,
okay.
It's just that simple.
Awesome. Yeah, it really is. Okay, so let me address this since we're going through this course, and this can be a quick one too. But what's happening? I think what frustrates those on the ground is a lot of times we get people that are saying, "Hey, I'm a patriot. I'm with you guys. I love the Constitution," and then they push us to not stand up for it. They push us to not question the things that you're talking about today. They push us to stand down, and I'm just speaking generally today. How would you address, when we're on the ground, how would you address those that are trying to insist that we just need to shut up and follow orders? I mean, obviously, we're not going to use force against them. They have a right to their speech, as you just addressed. But how do we address that in a principled way? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, and I don't know, specifically
Of
what's
course.
going on out there.
Yeah.
I live in a dark box,
Right.
So I don't want it, so I just don't know specifically what is happening, and and maybe you can rephrase your question a little bit more for me to try to understand a little bit more what you're getting after. It's very clear, and I've spoke about this many times, even well before I went to Oregon, or well before I got arrested, and that is, in order to maintain your liberty,
Right.
in order to maintain your rights, you have to claim them, meaning state and show and claim that they're yours.
Right.
Facility.
You have to claim them, you have to use them, you have to use and be actively using them, and you have to defend them.
Right.
And if you stop doing those at any time, they will be taken from you.
I agree. So it sounds to me like. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off. We got a delay here. So.
No, I'm just saying so that if there's an effort out there for people saying, hey, look, it is my right to speak. It is my right to speak out. It is my right to speak against government abuse or whatever it might be.
Right.
It's my right to speak. They might even be something that we totally disagree with,
Sure.
But it is their right, and they have to claim that it's your right. Then they have to use it. They have to actually do it.
Yeah.
They actually have to speak out. They actually have to. And then when someone tries to take it, it is important that they defend it.
Exactly. And I guess
maybe
that's.
the question is.
Yeah, I think to rephrase it a little bit, and I think you pretty much covered it, but I guess what I see happening, and not just, I don't even want to address specific incidents because I don't want to fuel our, infighting, but we've seen this all year, and you're saying we need to defend our liberties, and sometimes people are down there saying, no, you just need to protest, and you need to look to the officers to work it out for you. But it sounds to me like you're saying we just got to forge forward. We try to educate people. We don't use unnecessary force, and we just keep speaking up and being bold in a principled manner.
You have to, and we have to keep teaching the people correct principles so that they'll govern themselves correctly.
Right.
And that goes, for us, and that goes for, those in government positions, and it goes for the officers of the law.
Exactly. Okay. Ammon, you've done great. I mean, we've really got some great things, and I'm sure we could do lots of other questions, but I don't want to go too long. I do want to close with one, and this is a personal question about me, because I have seen some people that say, well, let me just be quite frank. There's some people saying Gavin's taking advantage of the Bundys for money and things like that. So my question is simple. I don't want to address individual instances, but do you feel that in my stand I've been in any way unprincipled from what you've seen, or that in any way I've taken advantage of your family in our discourses and our working together?
Gavin, I have no idea where that idea would come from.
Yeah, I know, but
and I just want to make it clear that I had no idea that Gavin was going to even bring this up, which I'm glad he did. But it's actually just the opposite. Gavin has done hours and hours and hours, and many more hours on top of that, of helping me try to get messages out there, and spending a tremendous amount of time, videoing and cutting and splicing and editing and all of that he does, amongst other things. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all the people that have done that, like
Exactly.
like Shannon Bushman. He spent hours and hours as well doing that.
Right.
And I can honestly say, Gavin, that I don't know of anybody that's ever taken advantage of me in this movement.
Good.
And I'm so grateful for that. In fact, I owe people a tremendous amount that I don't know that I could ever repay them back.
Well, we owe you a tremendous amount too, and I really appreciate that, and we appreciate your effort, because the truth is you guys have put it all on the line, and I'm so disappointed in myself that I haven't in the past year. I mean, my goal was like, we got to get these guys out, and we're still waiting on God, and we're still looking to Him. But I just wish that we could do more. Sometimes it's frustrating because it's so hard to get people to show up. It's so hard to get people to unite on these principles. It seems like there's just always a distraction. It's like it's like the feds are working behind the scenes to constantly keep us at each other's throats, and it's so hard for me that we haven't been able to get you guys back to your families yet. And so
Well, it is coming. I am certain
it's
of
coming.
it. We just constantly see the hand of God in our lives, and giving us strength in our families' lives, and in all of you out there.
Right.
And just remember that it is our obligation to love our neighbor and to do to him as we would want done to us.
Right.
And we can have differences. We can believe. We can have different faiths, different ideas. We can disagree.
Right.
But the thing is we need to unite in our preservation of our liberties.
Exactly.
And really the enemy, and I feel confident in saying this, the enemy are these bureaucrats, these full-time government employees that have made it their job to create regulations that are literally strangling our freedoms. And officers, I speak to them as well. Anybody who's willing to enforce these policies, these regulations that are actually straining liberty, then they're against liberty. You're either for it or you're against
simple.
it.
It's simple. All right, Ammon. Well, that's phenomenal. Before we close, and I want to say a few words so you can say a few final words before they cut you off. I do want to say, and I appreciate your thoughts, and I just really want to commend all the people that have been consistent out here. And I just want to say, in a particular recommendation for commendation, obviously, your wife Lisa and Angie Bundy have done really well, but in particular, I just want to mention to you Sarah Redbuck, Kelly Stewart, John Lamb, Josh Martinez, Nathan Syme, Lindsay Samansky. I mean, people that have just been working and put it in on the line to keep the message going for you. And I know you know these people. I just wanted to mention them when we were on the air, and there's many more that we could mention, but I just want to thank them, and I want to thank you. This has been a great conversation, and we can do one whenever you want to. Do you have any closing thoughts before they cut you off? I think you got about 30 seconds.
No, other than I can't thank everybody enough. Just base your stand on principles, correct principles.
Right.
On the principles of freedom.
Exactly. Well, Ammon, we will talk to you soon. This was a great conversation. I know people are going to want more of them, and I'll let you go, but you're in our prayers, and I just thank you for your service, and just lift up the other guys in there and let them know that we're not stopping.
All right.
Thank you. Your time is up.
All right, guys.
Call ended.
So, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed. Get the word out. So there's the facts, right? I don't have to always have the same style as Ammon, as Kelly Stewart, as John Lamb, but we need to get out and we need to stand up. We need to stop pretending. Hi, Angie. Hi, Lisa. Kelly. We need to stop pretending that what's happening in this nation is okay. And so, guys, head over and support these guys' families. We're going to keep the message going out here. We're going to try and keep the message strong. Get the message out, but do something, right? Pick up a camera. Be behind the scenes like my wife is, keeping us supported like Sandra does, keeping it moving. Be taking action. And I was down at the Bundy house, at Ammon's house last night, and honestly, I mean, I had to step out of the room for a minute when Lisa was on the phone to Ammon, because it made me sick to see what's being done to our families, to our children's birthright, and to America, because people say comply. follow orders, that those who violate us, that people say that those who trample our liberties, who violate us in the courts, who refuse to do their duty, that they must be upheld as the heroes and the peacemakers, and that to have unity is to align with those that violate liberty. To have unity and liberty means we have to come together. We need to be slow to anger. We need to be quick to forgive. But we need to haste to defend the innocent. And the reason these men are still in jail, the reason our prisons are filled with innocent people, from the native to the white to the black, from Jeff Winehouse to the Bundys to Schaefer Cox, to Ammon, to Ryan, to Jerry Loomis, the reason our prisons are filled with innocent people and with violations of due process while traitors run our government is because we, when our sheriffs fail, are afraid to stand, and we have to stop being afraid. We have to stop being afraid. We have to be strong. We have to not worry about what they say and when they hate us. We have to be willing to say, no, you're wrong. We have to speak out. We have to resist with principle. We have to fearlessly and tirelessly run for freedom, or our children will always be slaves.